winter of uncertainty. Okay, I think this one is a bit more cinematic. This is the night version, the day one, but let's see if there is a mood board we can discuss first. This is the assets. Maybe we don't have a mood board here. Oh, there is one. There it is. Let's see this first.
Yeah.
Two different moods, sense of the concept.
So I would actually like to start on this one.
Yes, please.
I think Sonja has quite a few comments on this one as well, because I remember that you had some comments earlier when this was a new entry, which is great, by the way. But one of the things that actually stands out here already in the mood board for me is the block out. It's a completely different image. So the person who made this image had a different idea to begin with, and then ended up working with it probably, but ending up with a new idea. And there's definitely coherency with the moods themselves to the final images. So the going for like a more cinematography kind of vibe to it, is more cinema. But the main idea concept for the scene itself is pretty far off the scene idea concepts and block out in this part than the final image. There's nothing wrong with changing your idea and going with something else, but you might actually want to step back a bit further and then create a new mood board with your new idea so you can test it out before you end up spending time or wasting time with an idea that turns out to not work that well. And I think this mood board actually shows that pretty well. There's not anything clear in this mood board as to what direction besides moods themselves, what you're going for, except that there might be something with trees, something with buildings. Go. But that's very vague, except for, you know, I love the end result. It's great, but there's no clear idea before this end result. This end result, I'm pretty sure, ended up being a happy accident, basically, from just messing around.
Yeah, you know, for me, like when I look at these mood board images, to me, it's all about, it's all about lonely, emptiness, like isolation, right? Which is not what I get when I look at the high rise in the final image, right? It's a very different feeling, very different mood. So it's, yeah, there's definitely a discrepancy there. And again, that's fine if you're just trying to, like, if you're just looking at the lighting aspect, but even the lighting is different in these images than it is in the final images as well. So, you know, it might be good to go look for a couple more images and really try to figure out what it is that you're trying to say. Kind of what you were saying, Nicholas, right? Just identify your message. And if it changes, then go back and look at some more references to really, really nail that message down.
I agree. Yeah. So basically know where you're going before you set off. It's a confusing mood board. So maybe he should go back and rethink the process again. But let's see the end result, which is definitely has a cinematic look. And we can talk about what can be improved. Yeah, so this is two different shots. This is the night shot, and then you have the day. Sonja, Nicklas said you want to say something, so I will let you to start for this.
Oh, okay. For this one, for me, there's a couple things that stood out. I think it's an interesting story. I'm intrigued by it, but I think it's a bit heavy-handed. You know, it's like, I get it. You need to, I want to see, I need to look at that person, and I get it. There's an open door that I need to look. To me, it's a bit too heavy handed. It doesn't need to be quite so bright, right? They're almost the same intensity. Everything else is like a blue, you know, blue muted lighting. And these are bright yellow, almost red, hot, intense. For me, it's a bit unnatural, and it's a bit too strong. You know, I would love to dial down the intensity of one of these. Maybe, you know, maybe just the opening and the front entrance down below, maybe make that a glass wall so we catch some night's reflection in there. That would be nice. And then maybe just have a little bit of a light blooming from the lobby coming out, just muted, a little bit more subtle. And then I have a bit of a scale problem. The trash can. Look at the trash can.
Good, right?
Yeah, I'm having a bit of a. The scale is a bit confusing to me. It feels off. I don't have a better way of putting it.
It might be the camera being this low to the ground as well. I don't think that's helping that much, because that makes something that is also low to the ground, as in the trash can itself, makes that bigger because you have this pyramid composition instead. But so yeah, it's weird because it's actually hard to define what exactly that puts the scale off, because the trash can compared to a tree looks okay in itself, but there is something about that trash can and the scale in its own right.
There's smashed soda cans on the bottom of the trash can that are really, really large. So overall,
oh yeah, yeah, I didn't even see those.
Yeah, that trash can is really throwing me off. You know, I mean, if you want to have a foreground element, which is great, you know, I love foreground elements. Bring it closer. Bring it really closer. Add some depth of field to it, and then we don't have that issue anymore.
Yeah,
good advice. Let's also see maybe this image.
I think comparing the two, they're a bit of I like that there is a huge difference between the two. I like the idea of that, but they're both too extreme in each direction. I think both images would be better if you not as desaturated for the night version and not as saturated for the day version. They would still be very different in feel, both of them, and would probably still work pretty well as well. It also has this like there's the idea with using the tunnel we're in or whatever we're in as a framing for the image itself. That idea in itself is a pretty good idea actually, but it's also just plain walls with a bit of texture on them. They do get a little bit boring and heavy for the composition itself. You're forcing, like I was mentioning before, this pyramid composition. You could either have a pyramid with the edge with the top on the top bottom or in the bottom part, right? And one of them makes stuff smaller and one of them makes it larger. And I did it opposite, obviously. And this character, this very obvious character we have in the window, I cannot figure out for the life of me if that's a protagonist or an antagonist. I actually don't know if we're the bad guy or if we're the good guy and opposite for the person in the room, because I can't actually agree with myself if it's eerie or not. Are we the ones looking at him, or is he the one looking at us, basically? And it gives this confusing vibe to itself. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I cannot, you know.
Yeah.
I figure it is weird, but that's why I'm intrigued by it also at the same time. But I'm like the red lighting. I'm like, I feel like he's evil. It's just red lighting. I'm like red, you know. I'm from Germany. I'm Western civilization, so red generally means anger or passion. It's different if you talk to somebody from different parts of the world. But for me, red is anger and evil, and so I think he's not a nice guy. But at the same time, the door is open, which is inviting me to go in. So I'm just
exactly. Yeah. I think that's the issue, right?
But I think that's the problem. I think the door is always fighting with this character.
Yes.
I'm supposed to look at him, but the door is so bright and my eyes goes there. So I'm fighting between what is more important, and that's the issue here, I think.
Yeah, because with him, I want to run away, but the door is open, so I'm supposed to go in.
Exactly. So what exactly is going to happen?
Exactly. So it's like I'm in limbo. I don't know.
I should run. Yeah, that's the thing.
We should probably also mention the Nicklas, your favorite probably at this point, texture on the trees.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a theme for me, I guess. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, right? It's this smooth model with just a texture on it, and so I'm guessing it's either just a diffuse or albedo, depending on where you come from, I guess. And there's no roughness to it, as in there might actually be a roughness to the reflections themselves, but I'm missing shadow detail and highlight details on the tree trunks themselves. And it is a very common thing for people using trees, especially if you're using, because a lot of people end up using assets for trees instead of making them themselves. And I don't blame them. It can be a pain
in the butt. Trees are a pain in the butt to make. But I mean, just like a good solid bark texture, right? That has the nice grooves, has the nice breakup. Throw in a normal map on there just to give yourself that, that extra punch.
And even if this is assets, because if I remember correctly, this is done in Unreal. That means the person would have access to like Megascans assets and so on. And they have a lot of trunks with lots of, there's photo scanned assets actually. So that would even have worked probably a lot better for this. If they had the right scan for the right mood and tree type and all of those, obviously there's a lot of things there. But that could be a solution to some of those. Obviously you can also just make it yourself, but in that case, it needs like displacement or something to work with, or a normal map, depending on.
Normal map will do it. And if you're working on real normal maps.
Yeah, don't displace your stuff if you're in the game engine.
Don't do that.
Yeah, but a fine detail, it will definitely help. I totally agree with you. Okay,
cool.
Move on. Let's move on. So just keep everything on time. So while it's snowing outside the window. Okay, interesting. I think, me and Nicklas will talk a lot about the image. I think the potential is huge. We're both, I'm sure Sonja as well, we're both fan of the amazing research and mood board, and everything is so clear of the story that she wants to create. And you can see the depth of the mood board, of how much she experienced different things, she experimenting with different things. But I don't see any of this in the final images. I will let you know why. So this, all the assets, and then you see all these details on the scene, which is great. Okay, so we have enough models here. And while you're experimenting with the scene, I can see the quality of the displacement maps here, beautiful light, everything's here. You can feel the stove. There's light in the back. So everything's here, but in the final images, if I go back there now, it's gone. All the details that she created, they're gone. I don't feel the stove. I don't feel the background. It will be a perfect spiral for me to start from here and end here, but it's darkness. And I think it's just, you're almost there, because I love the composition, I love the details, but there's nothing on the other side. It's just black. And it just feels that you're almost there, but you haven't finished the job. I don't know what you guys
really feel like this is
it would be ideal to see the stove, see the light, see the fire, see the background with highlights, hierarchy, low light, warm, because the detail from the model is there, but I don't see it on the final images. And you have so much detail on the left, on the right, nothing on the left. So that's just, potential is there, but it still needs work for me to get to say the message that you have, the story that you want to say.
Yeah, at this point, it's a still life, right? It's no longer about the background, just a still life now. Yeah. And for a still life for this to work, that actually the composition doesn't work for me if it's just a still life, because then we have too much blackness on the frame left. So I'd actually trim that off if it's just, if we're going with this and this is just not just, but this is a still life, right? So then I would trim that off. If you wanted it to be about the environment, we need to actually see the environment, right? And there needs to be a good balance of the detail on the table and on the detail in the background. So we need to balance those two things out. But since we don't have that here, we're looking at still life. Which I love still lives. I think they're beautiful. I think that there's a real art in the placement of the actual elements within those still lives, because it becomes so important of where you place them. And when I look at this as just again, not just, but as a still life, the materials need a bit of work. The ice cubes don't look like ice cubes. There's some problems with the shadows underneath there. What's going on? They're missing an ambient occlusion. They're missing a contact shadow. It almost looks like they're floating.
Like they're floating, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Beat the scene, yeah.
The bump on the glass itself is very, very strong. I would dial that down. Again, less is more. the oranges read as a little bit plasticky, so there's some work there. So overall, I would say the materials can use some more work and some more refining. And again, with materials, especially if you're just getting started, I remember when I first got started, I was so excited when I discovered pump maps and normal maps. Oh my God, I was so excited. I cranked those things up to eternity. And you know, as you get more experience, you figure out that it's actually less is more.
Less is more. That's
Less
a great
is more.
message. Less is more. We
It's
should
like
print that, put it on the wall. Less is more. I love it.
It's the 101 thing when people use ZBrush for the first time as well. They're going, you know, they figure out that they can up their subdivision levels on a model. So they up it to a very high quality so you can really add details. And then it just ends up being a lumpy org or whatever you're probably doing the first time, right? Instead of starting with the refinements and just working your way into the details as you go along. It's the same with materials.
Slowly working your way up, yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's actually a funny part about this because the oranges or whatever fruit that is, it's probably an orange type. So the citrus fruit, I guess. So there is actually a test render earlier in the post of that citrus fruit that actually works pretty okay. I mean, there might be a little bit with the reflections or whatever, but that citrus fruit right there in free air looks great. I actually like that. Yeah. But there is something happening in the end result, like in the, I think especially it's a bit on both renders, but especially on the daylight version, I think the warm version is as if there's light under them coming up, or it's probably because of subsurface scattering maybe, or something like that. There's definitely something weird happening. And it's the same kind of issue with the ice cubes, or no, sorry, not ice cubes, the sugar cubes.
Oh, that's what they're supposed to be. See, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's sugar, right?
I had no idea. I thought it was ice
my
cubes.
guess, at least.
I had no idea. Okay, but the fact that we don't know is a good point.
Exactly, and I think, because if there is sugar cubes, and I can imagine it would be pretty hard actually making those work pretty well, because it's crystals. It's a crystallized substance that works in a very advanced kind of way. The shader wouldn't be easy to probably make good, at least not the first time, especially if you're newer. And the sugar cube, sorry, there is a funny thing about the reflections on the table as well, not really being there, or at least not matching the lightness of that cube, especially in the cold image where they're kind of self-illuminate somehow. And that stands out a bit too much. But the main things in this image, I actually agree a lot with Nikos. There is a lot of potential in this image because all the work has actually already been done. And there's so much to win on this image by just redoing the lighting. Delete your lights, make them again. Basically, start with the window, which is on the right side, and see how much ends up hitting the background as well. Maybe light up the stove, get some focus on that as well. Just one thing at a time. Don't focus on trying to make it warm and cold and all those things to begin with. Just start with white lights and just keep it simple. And then if you're using V-Ray or a Corona renderer, you can use light mix to color the lights as you go to get a warm and cold feeling and all these things. That's at least what I would do if I had to redo the lighting on these.
Can I just mention something? Because we have Alexandra with us in the chat, and she just mentioned this was her first try to make her own materials. That is impressive.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry. That is
impressive,
yeah. Alexandra. So that is seriously impressive. My first materials, I can't even, good God, you don't even want to know.
You don't want to steer first materials.
No, that looks really good. So you should feel very proud of yourself. This is awesome. Great start. I can't wait to see what you do in a couple months from now.
Yes, keep practicing, and we'd love to see your work again. And congratulations. Yes. Seriously, if this is the first time doing materials, you're on the right path. Yeah, you will get there.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so winter scenery. This is our next.
I think this one will be the last entry before we go over to the winners from the challenge, just to keep us on time, because we're Like
Great
we have,
point.
in theory, 15 minutes, but we
Great
go as
point.
for when we're done. But
it's good to keep it as short as possible so people can watch it again. Yes, I'm gonna go down to the mood board.
Oh, Nikos, I want you to start on this one.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. The atmospheric mood board, it's helping me that the story is about the house and the moon. That's what I see on the mood board, and I really enjoy it. And this is the second mood board. But seriously, when I see this image, I believe that the deer, it doesn't fit the story. If you want to keep it there, you need to bring some life and light into the deer. But for me, it should be all about the house and the moon. The first focus point should be the house, this warm light, feeling you safe inside, and then the moonlight. And I will definitely change the position of the moon as well to create another spiral again, because imagine if the moon was a bit higher, it would be a perfect spiral. But now he's not doing that. He's using the deer in the foreground in such a big element. This is a good example of how the lighting of the deer is supposed to happen. If you want the deer, bring some light. Imagine there's somebody with a flashlight looking on the deer. Just bring some creative light on the deer. If you don't do it, from my perspective, then it doesn't fit the story, because my eye is supposed to look on the house and I have this deer, dark deer, no light in front of me. And I prefer not to be there so I can focus on the house and then get on the moonlight, the second focus point of the image. Then it will be a perfect story. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like he's using rule of thirds, but they're fighting and it's not helping me to look on the story, which based on the mood board, it's the house. I can feel it. I feel that he wants to make an image of this beautiful warm light inside and safety in the winter. And the moon is the second focus point, in my opinion, based on the references. And I don't see it here because of the deer. And the moon should be brighter, up in the sky, and follow your mood board because it's glowing. Again, first focus point, second focus point, and then you have a story. That's my take. But of course, there's a lot of details. He succeeded on creating the mood. It's just small things that I believe, like the deer, change the focus a lot of the image.
Nicklas, do you want to go first or you want me to go?
I can go. It's fine.
Go for it.
I agree with the lighting problem and the deer itself. The deer could be there, but then it had to change position with the house, and the house needs to be removed then instead. And you need to redo the lighting, obviously, because you're removing the warm lights. I don't believe this image will work as well having both characters. I'm referring to both as characters in this case. If they're both there, at least you would have needed like a rim light on the deer itself to incorporate it into the warmth of the house. And probably in terms of composition, you need to bring them closer to each other. Like the deer is curious about the warmth or trying to get some of the warmth from the house and then incorporate the stories better in that way. But there's no way any of the lights from that house is interacting with the deer itself. And the deer just ends up being very, very flat. That could have just as easy, if that's modeled, I'm sorry, but it looks like a cardboard cutout instead, right? And if it is modeled, at least then let us see the hard work going into it as well. Get us, get some lighting, get some shape to it, some form, right? So it's all about silhouette, shape, form, all of those things. And there is a silhouette to some degree. It's a little bit cluttered with the background, but we're not really seeing the form. It might as well be a cardboard cutout. And I would also like to mention the idea of creating this frame around the image. I like the idea of it, but it's way too obvious. It's way too much a frame. It would have worked if it was just like the pine needles on the lower right side of the image maybe, or the left side, depending on the end composition, not all the way around, even though it's creating a vignette, I guess. But yeah, sorry, Sonja.
I don't know. I agree. Sorry, somebody's drilling above, so I hope this doesn't pick up too much audio.
Oh, it's
good.
Fine. We don't hear anything.
All right, good. So actually, for me, my first thoughts was that this whole frame is overall very, very busy for me. There's no area of rest. There's no negative space, right? Even like in the sky, there's snow falling, so there's detail there. There's a breakup to that. So I'm missing that. I'm missing negative space in the image overall. Then the other thing is that the deer and the house, if we just look at the frame, they're almost evenly sized. So they have the same importance, not just the lighting, but also like, you know, they're almost the same size. So that is also, so they're competing with each other. They're also creating a very balanced frame. The tree in this, the pine tree is dead center in the frame. So it's a very balanced composition, and balanced composition can be good, but they can also be boring. So they're kind of tricky. They're tricky to use, and you really need to be careful with them. You really need to have an intention with them. So in this case, I think removing some of those details, add some negative areas, remove that deer or bring it closer, make it a foreground element, make it a shadow, you know, put him into shadow. Like you said, he's strangely lit. That's my next actually comment that I have. Because if we look at the moon is really dim, but our environment is quite bright. We see everything. Where's that light on the snow in the foreground coming from? Because look at the moon would be the light source in our scene, but it's very, very dim. So there's some balancing, and I would, you know, don't be afraid to let things just fall away into shadow and into silhouette. Don't be afraid of that. And I agree. I think the house works really nicely. I would keep that as my focal point. The deer, either remove it, bring it closer, put it into silhouette. I think that's all you need to do. And then remove some of the framing around. It feels like a postcard, you know, for a postcard, I think it'd be great. But if you just wanted to like be like an artistic visual image, I think show us a little bit more of the sky. I think it'll be really nice.
It's very much an importance of lighting, I feel like in terms of, because even actually the daylight works better because there's more depth in the image just because of the changed lighting. You can actually now define that it is in fact a 3D deer. It is not a cardboard cutout for fooling other deers. And there is atmosphere as well, giving more depth in the Z values basically, or if you're a max user, it would be, I don't know, X, which is weird. But at least the depth of the image, it adds more with the haze and everything going on in the image. And that helps a lot, actually. This simplifies the image a lot more than before. I still don't like the foreground, very obvious frame. It's okay to have some of it, but the photographer of this image would be hiding in a bush, like not comfortably at all. It would be okay to just have a single sprig or something like that. That's great. I love those ideas. But again, it is, even with the changed lighting, it comes out a little bit flat. I would love to see some more rim light or something to bring out the different shapes, to give some more interesting silhouette to all of it. But it's definitely better. It's more in the correct or a better direction, I would say. There's nothing correct and incorrect. Obviously, you can all interpret our feedback as you go on, but we're definitely trying to give some pointers into what can create a little bit more balanced or unbalanced on purpose images and so on, to create something that's more interesting at least.
And I agree with you, Nicklas, that this works better, but because also now the sky is giving us some negative space, right? It gives us some area to kind of rest our eye because there's a lot of detail in the foreground, in the midground, and then the sky, we can kind of just like take a little bit of a breather. So I think this works also better than the nighttime version. Absolutely.